Good evening from London, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for pro wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. Today is Sunday Funday, and we are going to be doing another version of our new game show that we are calling Wrestling Heaven and Hell, with our contestants arguing why their wrestling loves and hates should be sent to wrestling heaven or hell. The rules are simple. Each round, the contestants will argue what they believe should be either sent to wrestling hell or heaven, with me then choosing which pick will get that honor. And today's episode is a Backlash and Draft special, where the contestants will be asked to put things either Backlash or draft related into, you guessed it, wrestling heaven or hell. But joining me today, we have the first contestant, Clark Taylor. How are you, Clark?
I'm doing well. Stoked to be back once again. Sunday Funday, my favorite day of the week. I mean, I'm ready to go. I've got some good ideas. I'm psyched. I took the L to Kobe last week, but I thought I had a good showing. Either way, and I'm ready for some redemption.
Well, will the comeback be on? We will have to see. But you just mentioned him, and he is here again this week, joining us once again on Sunday Funday. We have Mr. Coby Galenzoski. How are you, Kobe? Oh, and there's a 2-0
Exactly. 1-0. 1-0. That's what happened last week when I was wrongfully posed as the devil. That I'm still not over that travesty.
Let's hope he hasn't seen today's thumbnail.
What?
You want it again, Kobe?
The first time hearing about this shit.
You've been the heel the whole time, Kobe. Wait, this what?
But yeah, anyway, well, let's get into the first one right away. And the first one, round one, is what is the worst Backlash match or moment that should be sent to wrestling hell? Kobe, you won last week, so you're going to go first. What match or moment are you sending to wrestling hell?
Okay, of course, rightfully so, the winner has to start it off. So, worst match / moment of Backlash history. Wait, oh no, the draft. The draft
concept. Oh, I messed it up. We'll go back to the Backlash again.
Okay, you're going to screw me that way. Okay, you're going to screw me in that direction.
There's always a conspiracy here.
There always is. Okay, anyway, so the worst match / moment of Backlash. I have to go with something that really was not good. And I mean, Backlash was known as a brand exclusive pay-per-view in its second coming in the 2010s. And this was Backlash 2017, where it was still a SmackDown branded show. It was still a SmackDown excuse me, it was still a SmackDown branded exclusive pay-per-view. But to have this as not a WrestleMania, but to have this as a main event for a pay-per-view just shows how this is so bad. 2017 had Jinder Mahal versus Randy Orton for the WWE Championship as the main event of the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, no one cared. Jinder Mahal being a top contender for a world title, nobody wants that. That's like saying Omos versus Roman Reigns is the next match for Night of Champions. Nobody wants to see that. I'd be interested if he goes over Seth. It'd be an all right direction. Roman just spear him and get it over with. But at the end of the day, no one wants to see Jinder Mahal in the main event, in the title picture. And keep in mind, Jinder Mahal actually won this match. At the end of the day, no one should see Jinder Mahal win the match. We understand what it was, and it was WWE attempting to get a new market with Jinder Mahal as the champion. But at the end of the day, no one wanted to see it. It was not a good match. The moment sucked because no one cared to see Jinder Mahal holding the title. At the end of the day, like if I'm sitting here saying, what is the worst Backlash moment? It has to be Jinder Mahal versus Randy Orton. And Jinder
Wow.
winning the title. It has to be.
Wow, okay. I mean, listen, at the time there was a lot of criticism about that, and understandably so, because I mean, there was a lot of speculation online about who could have taken the title off Roman Reigns, and nobody wanted it to be Jinder Mahal. But at the end of the day, it was. But here's something I will say about it: it
Randy
shocked
Orton,
us.
not Roman Reigns.
Not Roman Reigns, sorry, Randy Orton. But here's something that it shocked us. Jinder winning the title, nobody saw coming. And that is something which is a rarity in wrestling nowadays. Was the title reign great? No, but it was a surprise. So, Clark, what are your thoughts on Jinder Mahal winning that WWE Championship at Backlash 2017?
So I mean, Kobe brought some heavy artillery there. That's looked back upon pretty poorly by most of the fan base because Jinder's kind of a joke at this point as far as WWE champions are concerned, which is unfair to Jinder, I think. But right, everyone else, if you bring up a bad world champion or something, Jinder gets thrown into that mix, fairly or not, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's some heavy artillery. Like my pick, I went a little bit more obscure and a little bit more historical. Myself, I think while I think my pick is a worse moment than Kobe's, he picked a good one. I gotta admit, that is, in my eyes, it adds up. I understand where he's coming from complaints wise. Yeah. Is it time to give my pick too?
What is your? Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. I had to dig deep into the book. This is a Sick Day DVD my mom bought me in high school.
Ooh.
This is Backlash 05. And I remember it vividly because it followed WrestleMania 21, which was a Mania in LA that I enjoyed as a kid so much. And out of that, we had Backlash that year. And there's one match on this card that sticks out, and it's the worst match in Backlash history. It's 2005. It went 6 minutes. It is Kane accompanied by Lita against Viscera accompanied by Trish Stratus. At a time when Lita and Trish's rivalry was through the roof, there's no reason not to book them on this card in maybe a co-main scenario or a more important scenario than they were. We had the creepy storyline with Viscera stalking Trish, kind of, but then her also, because he was so big and dominant, kind of manipulating him and taking advantage. So they were like both heels that were working each other. That was odd in and of itself. And then Trish obviously turns on him at the end of the match and he smothered her, which was odd anyway. The whole thing was distasteful and odd. Made Trish look goofy when she was easily the most over women's wrestler in the company at the time. We're also off the heels of Lita's weird Matt Hardy stuff that's about to even further ramp up because the real life involvement of Edge, right? I mean, we're in the middle of a Matt Hardy and Kane rivalry over Lita. She at first is so creeped out by Kane, it's all about Matt saving her, but now she's suddenly on Kane's side and they're good guys. Never made sense from the outset. I was at the wedding show actually when Kane and Lita got married on Raw. That was in Anaheim. And if you include that with the 6 minutes of this match, it's just one of the worst storylines of all time. And almost thankfully, the real life stuff between Matt Hardy, Edge, and Lita happened because it evolved into that. And that's what we all remember. But the mess that it was, that rivalry was linked to Viscera Kane in 6 minutes, and Kane got the win. I mean, Kane could barely chokeslam him. It's the world's shortest chokeslam as far as like elevation and drop. It just was goofy, and yeah, the match as a whole was no good. And I'll never forget it because it's funny. The rest of this DVD is great. I watched it. You see by the case, it got a ton of use. Yeah. But there's plenty of good matches on that card. It's the worst one I've ever seen on a Backlash though, by far.
That is some great content as well. You bring in that from the archives of that Backlash DVD. But I mean, yeah, you both made really good points. And March76 is in the YouTube comments here saying, wasn't the Vince and God thing at Backlash? That was pretty bad. Yes, that was a Backlash 2006. That was bad as well. That very well.
Speaking that very well could have been 1-0 against God.
Oh gosh. But yes, I mean that would have been a strong contender there too, March 76. But I'll quickly wrap up this one here. A good friend of mine, Justin, also known as the Wrestling Classic on Instagram, he was training with he trained with Jinder Mahal a couple of times including an interview during his 2017 championship reign, and Jinder was putting in the work. He was working literally non-stop all day, every day. Like, people, according to Justin, people were saying that Jinder was one of the hardest working WWE champions outside of the ring that, in a long, long time. He really cared about that moment. He dreamed about that moment. And he, in my eyes, deserved that moment. It was a shock factor, and that's something which we don't really see in wrestling nowadays. Now, was the title reign straight up bad at some points? Yes, it was. The booking at certain points was awful in it. I mean, of course, that Shinsuke Nakamura segment, terrible. But I don't know if it, to be honest with you, I don't think it is as bad as Kane versus Viscera. It was a weird storyline. Like you said, Clark, Lita and Trish being involved just didn't really make sense to me. It was just like throwing them in there for the sake of it. So yes, I'm going to put Kane versus Viscera from Backlash 2005 into Wrestling Hell. Me and Clark scores 1 point. Now, here's the slight issue, guys. I've just realized I don't have a lever here today, so screw it. I've got a glass of water, and I'm going to use this instead. I hope it doesn't spill everywhere. Yeah. Kane versus Viscera, Wrestling Hell. But, that could have gone very
I was about
bad.
to say, I'm like, maybe take a sip before you pull the lid out.
It could have gone very badly. I had to
chug.
And then. But yes, let's now move on to round 2, which is, what is your favorite Backlash pay-per-view that you want to send to Wrestling Heaven? Now, Clark Taylor, we're going to head to you first. What Backlash pay-per-view is top of your list?
So I went back to the DVD collection once again. Backlash 03, Rock Goldberg. The impact that this had at the time wasn't quantifiable. People don't realize how big this card was top to bottom. First, you have Goldberg challenging The Rock, dream match that you didn't really expect after the failure that was the Invasion storyline. Now you actually get what we deserved in the first place. Rock's best heel work of his career. He was Hollywood Rock. It had the long entrance, the long music. It was awesome. What people forget, though, is this was also the night of the iconic Big Show Rey Mysterio match out of the gates. Classic giant David Goliath. And that match was super enjoyable for a curtain jerker. Everyone, I remember really liking it. People remember the images of, Big Show slamming him on the stretcher against the ring post, right? It was an awesome opening match. We had an awesome women's championship match between Trish Stratus and Jazz. We had Rikishi versus Sean O'Hare, accompanied by Rowdy Piper. It's one of Roddy Piper's last appearances in WWE. And that in and of itself was awesome because he's only 5 years removed from wrestling in a main event on WCW against Hulk Hogan. And he's accompanying Sean O'Hare, which obviously we know O'Hare didn't work out, but that was a solid match. Awesome tag team match, RVD and Kane versus the Dudleys. Another awesome tag team match for the SmackDown tag titles, Team Angle versus Los Guerreros. And then we had the 6-man with Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels, and Booker T against Triple H, Jericho, and Flair. And then people also forget we had Brock Lesnar versus John Cena for the first time in the co-main event before we even got to Goldberg Rock. It's one of the most underrated wrestling cards I've ever seen. I loved it. Top to bottom, it added up. It was a show that built to a crescendo. And yeah, it's my favorite Backlash if I've got the choices is 03. I got the DVD.
Okay. And yes, once again, there with the DVD. Bringing out the archives, Clark, here today. But, before I'm actually going to wait to give my thoughts on this pay-per-view because I do have a couple of things to say. But first, Kobe, I want to hear your pick. What wrestling Backlash event do you want to send to Wrestling Heaven?
So I got to play dirty here. I'm down around here. I got to figure out some holes in Clark's game right here. So he said two things that stood out to me. Big Show versus Rey Mysterio was not the curtain jerker. It was a mid-card match. The second, Cena versus Brock, was not the co-main either. The co-main was the Flair 6-man. At the end of the day, if you're going to sell me on a pay-per-view, get stuff right.
Well, it's on the back of the DVD in that order.
Well, never
Yeah.
trust
We're blaming the DVD,
Never
Kobe.
trust a DVD. Never
On the
trust
back of the DVD in that order.
So anyway, like that's the thing is I'm gonna continue to say it like this, is I am coming with a youthful standpoint of being a wrestling fan, probably the least amount of years of the three of us here, and really only just beating not Chaos. Soul's the only one who has less of a knowledge than myself. At the end of the day, to me, Backlash, since I started, hasn't had a solid pay-per-view. There's been one that I am going to say, but Backlash is being infamous for being brand exclusive pay-per-views in 2016, 17, 18. It was a weird show that had Samoa Joe Roman as a main event that people were leaving in. And then not to mention we had the COVID backlashes, which were either branded wrong with the greatest match ever, and Edge and Randy Orton, which I love that match. I adore it. It's one of my favorite matches that I've seen from Edge since he came back. At the end of the day, and then we also had WrestleMania Backlash as the branding for it. But I actually have to go with WrestleMania Backlash 2022. Last year, and I fully believe this year probably will blow it out of the park. But at the end of the day, last year's was just very much enjoyable. We had Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins too after their classic at WrestleMania, and this was, of course, preluding to their very classic Hell in a Cell match that people are very much still talking about to this day. Edge versus AJ Styles was another high point that they kind of under-delivered at WrestleMania, even though it was a solid match at WrestleMania. And they were able to deliver with shocking moments and almost the formation of what was the Judgment Day, with Rhea Ripley turning heel and the reveal of her black hair. It was really good. Ronda and Charlotte Flair had an I Quit match. This, once again, was a WrestleMania redemption, where the match they had at WrestleMania was not good at all. It was not a good match. Thankfully, it wasn't main event, and Kevin and Austin was main event. At the end of the day, that was a solid story. I understand Ronda was going to win regardless. And then keep in mind the main event, although wasn't like a world title match or a big-time match, it was just an enjoyable match because it was the Bloodline versus Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, and Matt Riddle. And these teams were almost... They were in a rivalry because we were leading up to title unification with the tag titles. We knew Roman and Drew were going to cross paths eventually, and they did at Clash at the Castle. And this match was almost, I don't want to say nothing we haven't seen before, but as a six-man main event, the crowd was electric. It was a great match. There wasn't anything bad because they really built up to Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre facing off in that ring. At the end of the day, even the two matches I haven't mentioned in Omos and Lashley, which was what it was, and Madcap Moss versus Happy Corbin wasn't a stain on this card. I think as a whole, Backlash to 2022 is probably the most solid one I've seen.
Fair enough. But I'm going to run through both of these now. Firstly, I'm going to go straight to you, Kobe. Your take. Backlash 2022. WrestleMania Backlash, as it was controversially known. Like you said,
No, wait, doesn't that count? Isn't that a different pay-per-view? Does that disqualify it? I'm just saying.
No, it is. It is Backlash. It is Backlash.
I'm kidding.
But,
just looking for loopholes. You never know. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Cody Rhodes versus
Seth Rollins. Play dirty like I was.
Rhodes versus Seth Rollins was a banger. It absolutely was. There's no denying it. The Bloodline versus Drew McIntyre and RK Bro, that was also a very fun match. And we've also got Josh in the comments here on YouTube saying he was a fan of the 6-man tag team match. But yeah, there were two very strong matches on last year's Backlash card. However, it did also feature Omos versus Bobby Lashley. And I'm going to be honest, I really was not a fan of Madcap Moss versus Happy Corbin. Edge and AJ Styles I thought was a little bit of a letdown. And Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair was all right, but I wasn't particularly that big of a fan of it, to be brutally honest with you. It was one of Ronda Rousey's better matches for sure, but still, I'm not a huge Ronda Rousey fan in WWE. I've said it before, say it again. But now let's go to the Backlash 2003 card. I'm going to be honest here. I watched this a couple of years ago, and I really was not a fan of a lot of things on this pay-per-view. Firstly, Goldberg versus The Rock. I thought that match wasn't great. Brock Lesnar versus John Cena, I was very disappointed by. Of course, it was a different Brock Lesnar and a different John Cena at that time, but still, I just wasn't that entertained by. I very much did enjoy the WWE Tag Team title match between Team Angle and Los Guerreros. But overall, I'm going to be honest with you, Backlash 2003 was a really stacked card, but I didn't really think it delivered. A WrestleMania Backlash had a few iffy things about it too, and if I'm being completely honest, I personally would have gone for you the Backlash 2000 or 2004, but...
I was going to go 04 because I love the Cactus match, but I didn't want to... That main event is tough to justify on that one. You don't want to talk about...
Yeah, I get
that. That's
that.
why I didn't go 04, to be completely honest.
Fair enough. But nevertheless, I am putting WrestleMania Backlash 2022. And by the way, nothing with the name WrestleMania Backlash should be going here, but we're doing it. Is going to Wrestling Heaven. So it is now 1-1 with Coby Galenzoski getting that point, equaling things with Clark Taylor. However, we are now moving on to the next one. And the next one is round 3, of course. And we're now moving on to the WWE Draft theme. And very simply, what is something that you hate about the WWE Draft concept / execution that you want to send to Wrestling Hell? Let's go with you first, Coby.
Okay, so I mean, everyone is a fan of drafts. I mean, they're always enjoyable from the standpoint of not pay-per-view events, but special times of the year for sports in general. NFL draft is currently right now as well. And right now we have the WWE draft. So WWE had a I want to say it was groundbreaking, but it was a very much important television deal and contract with Fox that started in 2019. In 2019 was, I guess, the last draft before COVID, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they did one thing with that entire thing that made it seem like it was Fox versus the USA Network. And the network war rooms was something I do not like, because it very much made the network's reaction to, we got Roman Reigns, we got Seth Rollins, and they like the people in the room celebrating it. It's like, well, why do we care about the network's reaction? I understand it's big for WWE to have a deal with Fox. And of course they have their long-standing relationship with the USA Network. But at the end of the day, I should not care about the way the network is reacting or the people in the network rooms or the war rooms. It very much made the war rooms made the network's reactions more important than the draft picks and the potential of seeing someone overall in a position to better their career, to see where someone like Seth Rollins goes at a time where Seth was in a puzzling rivalry with The Fiend, and then Roman Reigns was in another puzzling rivalry with Eric Rowan.
I forgot about that one.
Exactly. Like, at the time, they were weird, but this was supposed to shape the Raw and SmackDown for the next future. Obviously, COVID happened and all that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the war rooms was just poorly executed. And if I see people representing WWE, like if I see a war room representing Raw with Adam Pearce, at the time, Sonya Deville could have been there. like if they're with legends like they did this time around, I actually like that because I know who I'm seeing. At the end of the day, the War Rooms was like, these are just random people celebrating, and then not to mention Fox had a robot dancing around like a idiot. But I don't know. The War Rooms was not good to me.
No, it was the most random thing ever at the time when they were just celebrating, and it was comedic. The celebrations. I mean, I did find it a little entertaining, but it was ridiculously random. It didn't really add anything, to be honest, other than a bit of a laugh, although it kind of got old quite quickly. And it was so fake as well. It was poorly executed. I'll give you that much. I actually wasn't that big of a fan of even the network rooms this year. I mean, why Teddy Long was doing the picks of Raw, that confused me. And what actually confused me more is why they acknowledged Shawn Michaels was the head of NXT, and he was doing the picks for, what was it, SmackDown or Raw? And Hayes as well, Michael Hayes. The two NXT guys were now working for one SmackDown. It confused me a little bit. I guess. Yeah, sorry, Road Dogg, not Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes was earlier on, what am I on about? But yes, what about you, Clark? What do you want to put in wrestling hell about the WWE Draft concept?
Oh, it's funny because I hear where Kobe's coming from on the War Room things, but I think the biggest issue is just the order that the picks are announced. It's we get the first round, but then there's the pool, and only some people can be picked, some people can't. The impact of the picks themselves also feel like I'm being told about something that has already happened, and it's not. It doesn't feel like it's happening in the moment. It doesn't feel like they just got drafted. Even back to the concept is just the order in which they do the draft. They need to make the first few rounds more special. It can't be announced the two big picks like they did on SmackDown, then a few after, and then we get 15 on the SmackDown lowdown and online following that the next morning, and I'm supposed to keep up with that headed to Monday where they're going to draft more people. I don't get it. Do it in order. Make it feel like when someone gets picked, it matters. And that way we pop for them. I suggested actually before the show talking to Kobe, and this isn't even great for my argument, so if I'm hurting myself here, I apologize. But how about like a timer between picks so you can pop for the countdown before a pick's coming? I mean, that would be great for the in-house experience. And, you can kind of take from the NFL draft where once you get to the latter rounds, a lot of like the commentary and whatnot, it's all insight about the key picks from the early rounds. And you can mix that in on SmackDown Lowdown and on shows like that for further insight about how these picks impact. I don't get, it feels too much like we're being told like the two sides sat down, they did the whole draft without anybody watching, and they're like catching us up on something we missed. I want it to feel like the draft is happening now, and so the format of the pool and the rounds, that's what I want to throw in Wrestling Hell.
So you want to put in how they announce it, is it?
I want to put in the format. I want them to be drafted in order. I want them to draft in a real order where it's not like, wait a minute, how is such a huge name still on the board for Monday when we had these other 8 names announced on the SmackDown Lowdown that were picked ahead of them?
No, there's 2 different draft pools. That's the idea. So
no, that's what I mean though, is with the 2 pools, I feel like it devalues the pick itself. And there's a way to do it where you can get rid of the pool system and you draft, because it feels too predictable once the few names are off the board because of the pool system. You're all of a sudden, after the first few picks, you're all of a sudden looking at the pool for Monday, as opposed to thinking like, okay, wait, why did so-and-so go before so-and-so? It's like, it feels too much like a participation trophy thing. Like, we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings about when they get picked in order. Just do the rounds. It is the way it is, because then you have storylines to tell about. Well, can you believe whoever, hypothetically, it could be anyone, let's call it Dolph Ziggler. Can you believe Dolph Ziggler went so late in the draft and now he's on this big run? There's room to tell stories based on that, right? Oh, he was overlooked in last year's draft. She was overlooked in last year's draft. The tag team was overlooked before, and you're just leaving that on the table by trying to make it too fair to everybody. And it devalues the picks as a whole. It makes it not feel like a draft as much as it feels like just like shuffling a deck.
No, I get that. I get that. And you do make a very good point as well about the fact it does feel it feels like it's done already. And that's another, this kind of supports Coby's point ever so slightly, but it kind of makes the war rooms or whatever you want to call it feel a bit pointless too. This time with the legends just coming out with the picks. Well, was this decided like yesterday?
At least if the war rooms are making the call, like that's one thing you'll see on the NFL draft is they'll show a team's war room and you'll see the coach on the phone with a pick that's in the building, and then they'll show him on the cell phone and they go, wait a minute, is he on the phone with the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah.
And that's how you could have handled the war rooms to make it entertaining, right? Is to link the talent to hey, he's getting the call, you might be coming to SmackDown, right? Like that's one of the most fun parts about the NFL and NBA draft is seeing like who's on their phone. Oh, they're going soon. Like, you know what I mean? When they show the green room and then they show the team war rooms. So I think that's where they were going with that concept. Execution, I do agree that wasn't great, which I understand is hurting myself. But
you're really not helping yourself with this. But I think,
but I will say, I think it's that the telegraphed nature of the draft order is a more egregious mistake than the attempt at the war room thing, because at least the war room thing brings legitimacy on the business side. It's like, oh no, the Fox executives, the USA executives in those rooms care about these picks.
Yeah.
When you have legends coming out, like you said, Teddy Long on the wrong brand, and people like that, they're giving you picks that it feels like they happened 3 days ago back, in a room that we weren't invited to.
Yeah, and I know Coby's got a bit of a rebuttal here. So you have 30 seconds, Coby.
I think at the end of the day, we're looking at how how the application of it is actually happening. And if I'm sitting here and I'm saying the pools are bad, I don't necessarily disagree with two different pools, because WWE's in the position, if they don't do the draft as a premium live event, they are doing it on live television, and there's no way that a network is like USA wouldn't be mad that Fox is the only one getting it. At the end of the day, they have to make both shows important, and that is the use of the pools. If they were showing how the pools are being effective, like, oh, the Roman Reigns is off the pool, who's remaining, I'd like that. At the end of the day, I do agree, like seeing the legend bring out the card isn't necessarily a good aspect of it, but I do kind of like how we've seen way worse aspects of how they've ran the draft before, where this is at least tolerable and actually somewhat good.
It just doesn't feel like a real draft, I think, is my main point. Personally, right? It doesn't feel
no, I mean,
real.
listen.
Remember the computerized system?
Oh, goodness gracious,
that was bad.
Like
that was bad.
I mean, that is
listen. You both brought up very good points here. That there is an issue with the draft. It doesn't feel as, I guess, fun and as realistic as it could be. To Clark's point, but to Coby's point, that war room was comedically bad. However, it was slightly funny, even though it was bad. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm not exactly sure what exactly you're putting into, what you're trying to put into wrestling hell, Clark. Like the exact thing.
The draft order. It needs to be streamlined so that the first round feels like the first round, the second round feels like the second round, the third round feels like the third round. It's not the big names get picked out of this pool, and then we're just going to lob you the rest of the picks. Do it in order. Do it for real. That's the main thing.
Fair enough. I'm going to be honest, when you explained at that time, you actually sold me on it a lot more. And the draft war rooms, yes, it's cringe, but it's at least entertaining. And I do agree. Me and Clark, when we watched the draft this week, it did not feel it did not feel that entertaining at times. It felt like there was long gaps between picks, and it didn't really feel that intense. And they didn't really which is strange because WWE usually do give time for things to breathe. None of the draft picks had time to breathe as well, which is another issue. So with that, the draft order is going in to Wrestling Hell. Clark now is on 2 points with Coby G on 1. But we're now heading into final round, which is the best WWE draft moment. Clark, you kick us off here.
I can't wait because this one is so obvious to me. It's one of my favorite Raw moments from childhood because it's hilarious. It's when the American Bad A Undertaker was drafted to Raw in 2002 on Raw, and they had all the superstars backstage, and he went through all the stages of grief in about a 30-second clip. First, he pulled his sunglasses down and just looked. Then he pushed them back up, clearly upset. Then he stood up. He threw the can that was in his hand. He stood up. He threw the chair. Then he kicked the door, and he walked out of the room. And it's one of the most iconic moments in not just draft history, but Raw. It's great. It was vintage Undertaker. The whole locker room kind of went quiet because of his reaction. The other wrestlers in the locker room's reaction was one of the best parts. And it's just an awesome moment. It's I think something that could even help from our previous conversation this year's draft is we didn't see the reaction from Cody Rhodes to being drafted. Roman Reigns, show him, right? And smile. I'm stoked to be on the show that I got drafted to. It's a big deal to me. It matters, right? And whether the reaction is positive or negative, that's what I loved so much about this Undertaker moment is, the expectation would be like, hey, you just, you're on a brand. But obviously with Flair being involved at that time, and this is right before Bischoff, you could tell he didn't want to work for Flair. That was part of the storyline and what made it so great. But yeah, that reaction to getting picked was all time. It was like, oh, I went to the worst team, and I loved it. And not only that, I think it extended the American Badass persona to his best run, because when he ends up on Raw, one of his early matches is the iconic Jeff Hardy ladder match. That's one of his early matches after that pick, and that's when he was a heel. He was tough to not work with, but tough to deal with on SmackDown as the American Badass. Now he moves over to Raw. He's still angry, and it made it easy to tell that story, to put Jeff on a pedestal he hadn't previously been on outside of maybe the TLC matches, which are remembered more fondly in hindsight than they necessarily were at the time because they were looked at as mid-card matches. And so the pick went deeper than just the moment itself. It positively benefited Raw and Undertaker for the rest of that run until we eventually see him come back as the dead man.
It's one of the most iconic draft announcements of all time. We've all seen that video. I mean, here's something which is gonna really, really throw you off, Clark. That clip of Undertaker is older than me.
Wow. I was 11, but that's wild. I never thought of it that way.
But
that
yes, and Coby as well. He's younger than both of us. Older than both of us. But what about you, Coby? What is your draft moment that you want sent to Wrestling Heaven?
So I think we can all acknowledge that. I mean, there's flaws in the Wrestling Hell that just happened, but at the end of the day, in 2016, where this pick was very much prioritized and where the order did matter, and it showed it, and they very much acted like this was such a big deal. At the end of the day, in the very first round of the 2016 draft, Raw's third pick, or pick 5, if you want to call it, because they go Raw, SmackDown, Raw, SmackDown, Raw, was Finn Balor from NXT. Not only did Finn Balor get a really good pop, the commentary sold it like, holy crap, this guy from NXT is getting picked in the very first round. They very much sold Finn Balor as someone who has the potential and could be very important. And just because I looked at this, Finn Balor got drafted before 3 massive names. He got drafted before Chris Jericho, Roman Reigns, Obviously, Roman wasn't as important back then as he is now. And Brock Lesnar. To save someone from NXT like Finn Balor to get put in such a top spot, a top pick, a top draft pick is massive. And although it didn't pan out, he had the Universal title, he got injured. Obviously, we don't know what could have been if they really had the opportunity to push him and him to have a lengthy championship reign. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I'm not talking about the after. I'm talking about the moment and almost the importance of the first draft in so long that was actually a draft. Because we saw 2011 was the computer randomized system, and that was when Cena started the show off as switching brands and then went right back. And then that was like, oh, the Miz is all mad about it. At the end of the day, this was the first draft in that format of these two brands are picking. And to say someone from NXT got that pop, got that ovation, and got that spot that was supposed to be very important for his career, I think it's a very big moment for draft history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Clark, obviously, you were just talking about how there were issues with the draft order. 2016 basically had it perfect. And yes, I understand now that networks want different things and all that, but it felt a lot more important. And part of that was the return of the brand split. But it felt very important, and it established Finn Balor as a star without him even appearing.
But I gotta say, I left you. John Cena gets drafted to Raw, orange basketball jersey, and brings the spinner over. One of the most iconic moments in WWE history. Just softball on the table. After my Undertaker one, I can't believe you left that sitting out there. That's in every intro video. That moment, him with the spinner and the orange jersey on the stage at Raw, first pick from Raw, John Cena, you had it. It was in, that's a hanging curveball, and you went take. And trying to wait on a fastball, I get it. I like the Finn Balor call, but how did we leave that out there? I thought it's only logical. There's two moments. And Finn Balor came flying out of left field in my eyes, which I love. You backed it up, but when you first said it, I'm like, how did he not go with Cena in the? And then when they flipped the world title and the WWE title, and Cena with the big, and then Cena with Mr. Raw like the rest of his career.
Listen, you guys both brought up really, really strong points there. Finn Balor, like I just said, it established him as a star without him appearing. And that is something which WWE haven't done in the draft since Finn Balor. He's the only one they've done it with. So I was really, really hoping they were going to do it with somebody this draft. Maybe they will do it on Monday night, because I was hoping it was Braun Breaker, to be brutally honest with you guys. But obviously that's seemingly not on the cards now. But the Undertaker one, it's iconic. It truly, truly is. We've all seen that moment. We've all seen that clip. The expression, it was perfect. It was golden. But back to Finn Balor. I think this moment would go into wrestling heaven if he didn't get injured and he did carry on that run. And because of that, I feel like it did hurt that moment in the long term, because you've got to acknowledge it. You can't say you don't. You've got to acknowledge it. So for that reason, Undertaker in the 2002 draft of Raw is going in wrestling heaven, meaning Clark Taylor wins this week's Wrestling Heaven and Hell show 3-1 against Coby Galenzoski, putting the competition between the two at 1-1 overall.
Today's not
1-1.
EOBY.
But thank you really for listening to this show. We really appreciate it. We're here every day. We'll be back here tomorrow for Mailbag Monday. So make sure to head over to our Instagram to ask us a question, where me, Coby, and potentially somebody else, potentially Chaos, I believe, will be answering your questions and more. So please, guys, if you're listening on YouTube, leave a like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, 5-star and give us a follow. We really do appreciate it. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. Or, well, if there is a time change, it'll be over on Instagram. All the website, wrestlingrepublic.com. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Kobe's not happy. He's ripped out of his paper. See you guys. Good night.